Since the early 1970s, Al Di Meola has been one of the most popular and influential guitarists in the world. From his early years with Chick Corea, his historic performances with John McLaughlin and Paco de Lucia, to his current exploits with his groups Al Di Meola Project and World Sinfonia, Al Di Meola continues to be an innovative leader in acoustic and electric jazz fusion guitar. In this video, we'll meet Al and get a close-up look into his playing style and technique, along with personal thoughts on improvising, learning, and practicing. We'll also see Al perform many of his fine compositions. Some, which have been double-tracked, feature Al playing both the rhythm and lead parts.
Hi, I'm Al Di Meola, and welcome to my video. We're going to get into a lot of different techniques that I use with right hand and left hand, scales and picking patterns, as many different examples and tunes, also some new tunes that will demonstrate a lot of that. So before we get started, I want to give you a note to tune up to. I'll give you an A, although some of the pieces might vary a little bit, but this is a general tone right here that should work on most of the pieces. I started playing guitar in where I grew up in New Jersey, in my hometown. I began taking lessons at the age of 8 years old from a great teacher who is still teaching today, also still living in New Jersey. His name is Bob Aslanian, and both he and I wrote the book Chord Scales and Arpeggios as well. So it's been quite a while that I've been playing, and he was very much into jazz and the teaching of the theory of jazz in the very beginning. Although my heart wasn't quite there yet at that age, I got a good foundation and early basic training and theory and sight reading from him. I continued on with him for several years, and of course I learned a lot on my own just from listening to a lot of music records and going to concerts later on. I then went to Berklee School of Music in Boston, which was very inspiring at the time. There were, in and around the school, there were a lot of jazz clubs, and I would just check everybody out, a lot of jam sessions, keeping my ears open to a lot of new ideas. And I got a lot out of that before I got the gig with Chick Corea, and then everything happened from there.
In this section, Al demonstrates improvising over chord changes, beginning with a basic diatonic progression, followed by his approach to soloing over dominant, seventh, and diminished chords.
In a simplified chord scale, such as a C major 7, progressing to a D minor 7, to an E minor 7, to an F major 7, G7, A minor, B minor 7, flat 5, back to the C major 7. In this case, the C major scale will relate to all. My choice would be to play on each chord, but I'm going to give you an example of playing both ways and show you the difference. First, we'll start by by hearing each chord, and I'll play only in the C major scale, so playing no sharps and flats, but thinking of mainly a C scale, and then we'll show the other example after that. So let's begin with that first. So that's basically using, or just me thinking mostly of a C major scale. Now, like I said before, my choice would be to play on each chord, I think, if I saw the chart. And then you'll hear how I add sometimes like a G sharp to, when I come to like a G7 dominant chord, I'll add in the flat 9, or even on the last chord of the diatonic chord movement, which would be the B minor 7 flat 5, I'll use also a G sharp in a scale. I think sometimes these out notes colorize a little bit better. So let's give a little example of that. The C major 7 chord, I would probably have two choices, one of which would be a major, just a plain major, Ionian scale, or a Lydian scale, which is preferable, I think, because you have the passing tone being the F sharp. So more often when you see a major 7 chord, I think a Lydian scale may work, depending on the melody. D minor scale is basically that, minor scale, which everybody seems to. I would use scales where I don't so much think of modes, although we can use that as a basis, but primarily I like to target the 3rd or the 7th, or at least the important intervals in the chord. Finish a phrase on an important note rather than a 6th or a 4th. Now, the same thing for the E minor. We'll just use a minor scale for that. Now, sometimes on an E minor 7th or any kind of minor chord, I'll play a major 7. In the improvisation. You'll probably hear me playing a lot in my improvised solos, major 7 to a minor chord, or sometimes even a flat 2nd. Something like that. I like these inharmonic sounds. So there's a lot you can do. I like weaving in and out of the scale, sometimes going out of the harmony. Things like that. There's small little examples of that kind of thing. So if we, again, we're up to an F major 7th chord, which I think we can use that Lydian scale again, which is an option. Next chord would be like a G7 dominant, which when I see a chord like this, I usually add in a sharp 5. And I would probably use a whole tone scale there, or a scale similar to this. And then the next degree would be a minor chord again. And usually a minor 7 flat 5, we could think of Locrian. I mean, I don't think of modes that much, but it's basically what you want to do is start with that and then spin off and create your own thing. And then, of course, you can go outside the chord scale a little bit, chord structure, which I like to try. Let's try it again this time, and I'm going to play some chromatics within this. Also, with dominant chords, dominant 7 chords, you have diminished chords that relate to the same chord. So we have a 7th, a G7, you also have a D diminished. Okay, and you could play diminished lines, or you could play dominant lines or whole tone scales, depending on if you have a flat 9 in the chord or a sharp 5. As in this example, I'm going to play a run that is sort of a diminished kind of run that works over both the dominant 7th and a D diminished. Here it is. Here's the same line played very slow. Also works over E7 with a sharp 9, or just E7, or with a flat 9. It's your choice. Same with all of these chords relate going up or down a minor third. So there is a definite relationship between diminished chords and seventh chords. Here's another example of a line that could be used over diminished or a seventh chord. In this instance, let's take a G diminished 7. There's a lot of experimenting that I do when I'm improvising. A lot of it's, how I feel at the given moment. So sometimes I don't know exactly where I'm going, but that's where hopefully magic will happen in your improvised solo. It's how you weave back into a logical pattern that relates to the intervals in the chord. The key intervals being your third and your seventh primarily, sometimes your fifth. But a lot of it's your ear and how you feel. But I do like to experiment a lot. I don't like to play the same exact patterns. Playing chromatic notes outside of the chord, sometimes playing a different scale altogether, and then weaving right back into the harmony again is interesting. I never know what's going to happen when I'm soloing exactly, because it never comes out twice the same. So for now, why don't we just hear what a G7 chord is, and I would recommend that either a sharp 5 or a flat 9 be played so that it'll make more sense when you hear what I'm playing. Okay? So that's a little bit on the G7. And depending on the rhythmic variation that's happening with your rhythm section, whatever they're providing, that's going to determine where you're going to go. And of course, more chords would be, will also inspire a different direction. But I think when you're vamping on one chord, which is the case in a lot of forms of music, you have a long series of bars where you have to try to do something interesting. I think that rhythmic variation plays a real big part, and we'll be getting into that pretty soon too. Here's a little vamp now that comprises starting with a minor chord, going to a diminished chord. Third chord would be like a major 7, and then to a dominant 7, sharp 9. So it goes through different types of scales, and I'll show what I play over this sequence. 2, 3.
Al Di Meola's total command of the instrument is demonstrated by his ability to play both in vertical and horizontal positions on the fingerboard, sometimes even playing complete passages on only one string.
This is an example of how I would try to break the habit of playing in positions. And this is just an exercise of playing on one string at a time. So if I were to pick, say, like a G minor chord right now, I will play on the E string as melodically as I could in a G minor scale to learn the whole neck. Get used to playing the whole neck. It sort of gets you out of the habit of playing in positions. So let's try a little bit like that. Now, going to the second string, let's try the same thing just for a brief moment so we can get used to doing that kind of thing. Go ahead. Anyway, there's a lot that you can do even on one string, and hopefully when you practice something like that, it'll get you out of the habit of playing in positions. It's really a good idea to learn scale intervals in relation to chords so that when you're soloing, you can target certain key points like a third or a seventh primarily, and not just guess where you're going. So when I'm thinking of, say, the G minor chord, for instance, I actually look at the fretboard, and I pretty much know where all of my Fs are and where all my B flats are. So I'm targeting them at some times within the solo. So I think that's a real important thing.
Al Di Meola has long been admired by guitarists for his tremendous right-hand picking technique. Now, let's take a close-up look at how Al plays single-note lines using alternate picking and right-hand muting. But first, let's watch Al perform a tune from the album World Sinfonia entitled Lustrine.
regard to picking technique, right-hand picking technique, again, I want to emphasize the importance of playing the notes, playing the guitar, and without sounding like I'm preaching that this has got to be the way. I really feel that you have a much better effect in the long run to stay away from sweep picking and hammer-ons. You know, the overemphasis of that is not going to be good in the long run for more intricate kinds of music. So I would just, you know, try to develop the right hand as much as possible and avoid the shortcuts. And I really feel that sweep picking and hammer-ons are a shortcut and less effective in the long run. So hopefully in this video there'll be enough of demonstrations of how you can develop the right hand to free you up and play some more intricate music as you progress on the instrument. Okay, now that kind of thing is an example of me muting again, which will cause the notes to pop out. So your articulation when playing lines like that is very important, especially when playing with a group and you have to pierce through the drums and the bass and the keyboards. That's always been real effective for me to do that kind of phrasing, you know. And you have the option, of course, but I stay away from the approach of picking a note and hammering on. I prefer to pick notes. Here's another example of an exercise developing right hand using triplets. And again, we'll take the triplets down in tempo, so we'll lower the quarter note as much as possible, and then I'm going to speed up the quarter note and maybe come back down again. Now, the thing to achieve here is evenness. And this is an alternate picking style, so we have to get used to doing that kind of thing. Here I'm accenting the one. Now let me slow it down a little. Anyway, that's what you want to try to achieve, and to start slow, obviously. Again, the right hand, very important. No movement from the elbow. Movements in the wrist, okay? If you develop another way of doing it, you probably will not get as much fluidity. I have never seen anybody play like this, you know, and be able to do that same kind of thing as fluid. So it's important to concentrate more on the wrist action. Alternate picking is preferable, unless you're playing phrases that are somewhat like this. It's impossible to use an alternate picking style there because it would be awkward to go up, down, up. Now, if I played this real slow, up, down, and to think that you'll be able, in this position, to swing back up and hit the third string, which is your B flat in this particular triad, is impossible, especially at a fast tempo. So you want to be able to play passages that require you to play first string, second string, third string in succession, up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down. And that's a picking exercise in itself. It's a very difficult thing to do for guitar players. Okay, now if we were to do the same thing say, same triad, going down, starting from the third string this time, which is still starting in the B flat of the third string, D sharp, G, or in this case B flat, E flat, G rather. You want to go down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. So there are times when alternate picking doesn't work as a down, up kind of motion. And as an example, this example is a passage from a tune that I recorded on my first album, and it was a very, very difficult thing for me to get. So I used that as a practice exercise for myself to develop this up, up, down motion. Now, on this particular one, I'm starting with a triad coming up with F sharp, C sharp, G. If you could just try this real slow, this is an exercise. Up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down. Now, if you do this long enough, about this long, you'll notice your hand will probably tighten up right about here. And again, the idea is to play it real evenly. There's another example from a tune called Passion, Grace, and Fire from an album, Electric Rendezvous. It's a duet that I play with Paco de Lucia. That's kind of a tricky phrase. Here's an example of downstrokes on chords, all downstrokes. Except for this last chord. Let's just practice all downstrokes. Let's take it a lot slower so we can get it together. Okay. So you see how I'm relating to the time, and I'm playing against it a lot of the times. It's in Latin music, this is called playing against the clave being the time. And it's very important. A lot of it has to do with feel and everything. If you know whether or not you're able to feel the time and how you relate to the time. So. Okay, a lot of that feeling when playing these kind of rhythms is an up feeling. It's not a down. I'm not feeling down beats. I'm feeling up beats. Okay, that's just a general concept. You might not be able to grasp it at first. But I want to try some of the same kind of scalar lines at a slower tempo. So let's take it down about half that. And I'll try some things related to what I just did. Here's a triplet phrase that I examined and shown an example of in my book, picking technique book.
Orient Blue from the album World Sinfonia demonstrates one of Al's true strengths on the guitar, his ability to pick fast, smooth, arpeggiated chordal passages.
Let's talk about technique, right-hand technique, primarily utilizing the wrist instead of the forearm, trying to get as much movement happening in this area. I pretty much, when I pick, most of the time I have my palm rested on the bridge, which is important, and I get this kind of motion happening. I don't pick like this. I don't recommend it, this being a good way to develop or even get used to doing that, because then it's hard to break the habit. But try to get that wrist action happening as much as possible. So in this example, which is an excerpt from Orient Blue, a piece that I played already, this will be played a lot slower using this kind of movement. Now, there are times when I come off of the strings and I'll free float the hand. Which is more for the reason of getting a fatter sound when you move away from the bridge. But this is an exercise in itself. There's another piece as well that will demonstrate the same kind of thing. And just this little exercise here, without even changing to the next chord, is a great way to develop the right hand technique using skips. So going from the open A to the high E, downstroke, upstroke, down, up, up. See if we can get that happening. That open G in there, which I come up on as well every other time. It's very important to know where your quarter note is at all times. So I've got the quarter note slowed down to this tempo. Effective thing that I do a lot of times is I dampen strings, and that's where the palm lying on the bridge is going to become, important ingredient in having that happen. Obviously, if I'm out here, it's difficult. And actually, I just realized by doing that, I could dampen by lowering my pinky onto the string. But this is more effective in having the notes pop out, which is important for articulation. control, adding in those kind of those triplet kind of things. Here's your quarter note right here. You have much more control by anchoring your palm on the bridge if you want to do those kind of rhythms.
Coming up, Al talks about rhythm playing, which he draws from his vast influences in jazz, Spanish and Latin rhythms. Let's first watch as Al fills both roles as a rhythm player and soloist in his composition Cello e Terra.
In this kind of rhythm playing, it's important to point out what I'm doing here. I think a lot of times I use my upstrokes muted. Even the downstrokes are muted. So in this particular example, I'm going. Obviously, the muting is not happening on the right hand, it's happening on the left. So you have to become accustomed to releasing the strings. Here's your quarter note right here. Again. Of course, this hand has to get used to playing the rhythm. I'm going to slow it down a little bit more so you can see it better. Rhythm is percussion, and that's the way I use the guitar a lot of the times, whether it be rhythm playing or solo playing. This is an example using double stops in a particular piece. This particular piece was composed with the idea of percussion going on behind me, and more of a salsa vein. So that was the basic inspiration for the lick. But I think that it's a good exercise for left hand rather than right hand control, especially with the double stop. A lot of people ask me about my sound and what I use as far as outboard effect. There are two pieces of equipment in particular that I use with my acoustic guitar primarily, and this one reverb unit, which is a Lexicon 200, I utilize two different settings. One's a long concert hall, one's a short concert hall. And the short I would use mostly for rhythm playing if I'm for long phrases, I like to have it much longer. So anything that's played kind of slow, on the slow side, I will use a long delay. Anything that's played real quick, it's better to clean up the sound a little bit and go to the shorter reverb time. The other unit that I use is a stereo chorus, and this is a TC stereo chorus unit, and I utilize a certain setting here that works for me real well. So together, this is all I'll use with the acoustic guitar most of the time. With my electric equipment, when I'm playing electric, I've been using a Paul Reed Smith guitar. I have several of those models of guitars, some of which have DiMarzio pickups, some don't. And I have several different amplifiers. I've been using Boogie in the past and Marshall in the past. Depends on the type of music that I'm playing at the time. But I've been mostly using my old 1958 Gibson 175, which has been used through bag-end speakers, very good monitor system from a company in Illinois. And also the amplification for that, I've been using a Perot amp, which is made in New Zealand. And the same thing with that, I also use the Lexicon reverb with that particular setup, with the 175. And also the TC chorus works at times as well. In addition to my Ovation guitars, which I've been using for many, many years now, I have a custom classical guitar that I've been using and will be used on the new album as well. And this is made by Abe Wechter, who's a really good luthier in Michigan, who also makes guitars for John McLaughlin and a number of other guitarists on the scene. Before I say goodbye, I just want to also point out that a lot of the examples that I've used in this video are found, or other examples as well, are found in two books in particular that I have out, Guide to Chord Scales and Arpeggios, and also the Picking Technique book, Volume 1. There will be a Volume 2 coming out. And some of the actual music is in a book called Cielo y Terra, from the album Cielo y Terra. But I want to thank you for watching. Take care.